today we are super stoked to have our coffee friend number 12. Guess who it is? It's Chef Annabelle Choi. So, without further ado, flip it over. Hello. Hi. Hi. Alright, so, I guess some warm-up questions.
Sweet.
Tell us something that was really exciting about your week.
Oh man, got to work with the Burnaby Food First Foundation and Burnaby Hospital, where it's a suburban city outside of Vancouver. For those of you who don't know Burnaby. Yeah, and I just got to teach about 22 students how to make some bread and pizza dough, and it was a free class to the public, and it's really cool because it was a very different demographic than the one I get to work with in Vancouver.
Okay.
So we had people like in their 80s, we had people in their 20s, like full range of ages and full range of ethnicities. Some people didn't speak English, and the magic of food is that you don't need to know a language. It's a different language on its own. So that was a super, super fun day. And that was like maybe 2 days ago? Yeah.
Very
So that was really sweet, yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking about kids and food last time. We were doing a working group as part of Vancouver food policy and looking at ways to engage kids.
That's awesome, yeah.
Tell us who you are, where you work, what you do. Who's Annabelle?
Man, what is Annabelle?
What is Annabelle? I often ask that myself.
So my background's industrial design, and then I worked in industrial design for a while, mostly in humanitarian relief projects and first medical aid, so response materials. And then I got into the food industry because I realized how much food security and food philosophies dictate a lot of our natural world as well as our current society. So I started getting into food and realized if I could have any credentials in food, I was going to have to work in it. And also I also want to understand it. So lived in Ireland and went to a school called Ballymaloe, where it was like a 100-acre organic farm, and got to like birth a cow and all that and make milk.
Amazing.
Yes.
Some really cool stuff there.
Yeah, we did some really, it was just like kind of all over the board. And so, you know, I've always belonged to the coffee community, and I think the coffee community was the first thing that made me realize how you could specialize in any area. And considering it was coffee, and I always thought coffee was just more of something to drink and not necessarily an entire ritual that it is. And it just opened up my eyes in terms of any consumable product or anything that we ingest or celebrate, that it could be something you could geek out on or get really specific about and care about and honor, right? So, you know, when we talk about coffee and when you talk about food, it's kind of the same narrative. It's like you can look as far as you want, where it's like, you know, you think about the farmer, the grower, the processor, the roaster in coffee, or the chef in food, and then ultimately the consumer, and then the end result of that entire story, right? So as a designer, you know, we're always looking at the story, and I think food was just another medium to concentrate on. So yeah, then I became essentially a chef and a pastry chef, and lived and worked in San Francisco for like about 2 years. And then moved to Vancouver to help open up a bakery for Matchstick coffee roasters, and created like a sourdough bread program and croissant laminations program for them. And
Yeah, so by the way, if you were in Vancouver and you haven't had Matchstick's croissants, they're kind of awesome.
they're pretty good.
awesome.
They're okay. Yeah, they're good.
I went on a...
I always harp on Vancouver when it comes to pastry because I think we could be doing better in terms of international levels.
Yeah.
I think it's just starting out, and same could be said of like what we saw coffee do in the last 5 years. It's like my like, I want to champion like Vancouver and its multiple transdisciplinarities, because I feel like it's still a baby in some ways that needs to just get, you know, nurtured a bit more. But people have to stop leaving for that to happen. So yeah.
I want to develop that idea a little bit more. Well, let's move on to my second question.
Okay.
The last time we met, you had said something to me that really stuck out, and I found it to be like really helpful in kind of framing my viewpoint of being in a new city. And you had talked about, you were drawing on London, being in London and being exposed to coffee for the first time, and how like being in London and it's a big city, it's quite cold, and then also moving to San Francisco, like just moving around, that whole idea of being able to engage with people and create community wherever you go, as opposed to just like kind of being a downer. Debbie Downer is never a good thing. So tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, I kind of got into the coffee industry at Elysian in Vancouver first, like probably like 10 years ago. And Alistair, he was like one of the first people that showed me how connected an industry could feel. And it's because Alistair knew people internationally from his days in coffee.
Right, yeah.
And yeah, just like using that as a starting point when I moved to London, the first person he put me in contact with was James Hoffman.
Right.
And at that time, I was a newbie to coffee, and I didn't realize who James was within the industry. But regardless of not knowing that, James was so welcoming, and I think he's like that with anyone, regardless of where they come from within the industry or like who they are as a person. As long as you have like the innate passion and interest in something, I think that resonates with people. And I think that's kind of the magic of coffee, is that like no matter where you travel, if you're interested in coffee or another industry and you show like sincere, genuine interest in something that someone else has devoted their kind of life to, it's gonna resonate. And I think like it's cool within these cities that are kind of disconnected within each other. They're very desensitized to each other, or they seem like that when you're a foreigner. Somewhere like London, it's like, if you're not kind of within a niche, it's really hard to connect to people. And coffee was a great way of breaking that barrier, because all of a sudden here's like a foreigner who like people don't know why or they should connect with me specifically, but here comes a girl who's like just super into their passion and who just wants to know more. And it's not like I tote knowing about coffee, because compared to like everyone else in the industry,
There's so much to know.
I don't know
right?
enough about coffee.
The
but
more we know, like the more there is to know.
yeah, but like I sincerely like want to honor the people who are in it, and like I think I have such a profound respect for those people who have devoted themselves to this industry, because there's so much to know and so many variables within it. And like, even just going to South Korea recently, they could be described as like a first generation of coffee in terms of the way that they understand the philosophy of it, but their stores and their cafes are geared towards a third generation, right? It's like they have the places kitted out for really like doing the best coffee service, but their philosophy and how they approach it is kind of first generation, where that's how they understand coffee, and they're really sincerely invested in doing coffee. But from my perspective in understanding coffee, it's not my taste profile, it's like their style of coffee is not one I resonate with.
Okay.
Right? But then they're just as geeky about it in terms of the way that they approach it, right? So it's like Italians coming to North America and thinking that we do coffee not the best way. And when we go to Italy,
I
it's
think
like
taste profiles get shaped by like your environment.
Exactly.
And so it's exposure to, like they say, our generation is all about sour coffee. And people
yeah.
And like you just get fatigued and you taste things you love like sour. And then like, for example, like, Italian coffees a lot of them are mixed with Robusta, and they're quite dark. And so when they taste something like what we drink, they're like, where's the body? Where's the richness? Where's all of that?
Where's that golden crema? And you're like, ew, gross. What? You want like red, rich, dark crema? And it's just like, so having that kind of open up my world too within the perspectives of coffee. Like I think a lot of people have influenced my approach on coffee, and I didn't realize how much until kind of traveling around and like going to Italy, like I've been to Italy probably about 5 times. Like anytime I go to Europe, I'm always in Italy for some reason. Probably because of the food culture, right? Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
love that's
And like,
overwhelming, yeah.
it's when I'm there that I realize I drink coffee as a ritual and not sometimes for the taste of it, because I'm not used to the taste of Italian coffee, but it's still something resonates with me even when I don't agree with the profile. Like even though it's probably a straight up Robusta coffee, I'm just like, I'll drink it because like I'm in Italy and this is like what it's about.
We did that last year.
Yeah.
You only have to do that once a year to really remind yourself.
Yeah.
Ooh, yes, I have to take part in this.
It's good.
Part of like the questions, I think you've already touched on it, is I saw that you recently traveled to Asia, and well, it's like Korea and Japan, or is it? Okay. And so how did you find coffee culture, and not even culture but community, and how it distinguishes itself from what we see here in Vancouver?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Korea and Japan, specifically Tokyo, like Seoul and Tokyo, are two distinctly different bodies of community in coffee, where it's obvious with Tokyo that they really strive to play on an international level, and because of Hario and with all these other components of coffee make headway within Tokyo, it easily ties them to an international market, right? So all their communities and their visitors and the people working within Tokyo is very international, I feel, and then there's specific cafes that people will tour around, right? Otherwise, like, you don't really have a lot of cafes that would pull you into going there if you're interested in coffee, right? There's very specific coffee places that I think you would visit within visiting Tokyo. Like, when you ask people, the same names seem to come up again and again. Whereas in Korea,
is too different from here, Vancouver.
Yeah, it's very similar.
I'd go to
so and so. Yeah, yeah. Whereas like in Korea, it's kind of there's like 2 or 3 names that really do seem to come up, but then otherwise it's like you walk down the streets and every other cafe is a roaster. Everyone is roasting their own coffee in Seoul, and so you would think, coming from a North America perspective, that means that everyone is playing at a level where they really want to dial in because they care, because they're roasting their own coffee.
Like a totally different.
It's a different game, though. Yeah, and then so it's hard to say, because it's like there was only one cafe in Korea that I really prefer their profile. But again, it's like, I'm not going to name them either, just because I feel like, we went to 10 different cafes kind of that were recommended, and ones that weren't recommended that we just walked in on because it looked like it was kitted out. There's like one place that had like 10 siphons, like, and they had just a siphon bar and espresso machine. Like, they didn't have any other means of brewed coffee. So we're like, okay, these guys are like playing at a level, right? But they only had one person behind the counter. So you're like, so it's like if you have one person ordering a siphon, the flow of I guess service is disrupted, right? So it was interesting to see how their bars were kitted out, but their systems weren't necessarily up to that speed of having people come in on the regulars, right? So it was almost like how a slow wine bar would work rather than a busy
So you literally have to take half an hour to get your coffee.
Yeah.
Because I've been to a tea place here in town, and I was really excited to see specialty tea kind of crop up, and I think I had the same experience where the service model really didn't
match what they had.
And the experience that I had. I was like, okay, so like I got in there and I didn't know what I was supposed to do as a customer. Like, do I choose the tea or do you choose the tea?
Right.
Like, they're helping somebody else, so like, do I just wait for like 10 minutes till that brew is over and like they flushed it anyways?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like, whenever we travel with the mindset of looking at this industry through an international lens, and that's how we would judge somewhere, right? Versus how the culture already exists within a place, right? So it's like Japan and Tokyo specifically was playing on an international field, I think, or they were trying to. And I think people there travel enough to bring it back. Whereas in Korea, I feel like it's so insulated, just similar to some means of Vancouver being insulated, that you don't get a lot of intel coming in and out, right? Whereas Vancouver, I'd like to say, like, plays a little bit more internationally.
I feel like we have an international community. There's a lot of visitors. we were just talking before this that Vancouver continue to lead.
Yeah.
But maybe developing that idea, like how is Vancouver isolated, or how can we make it so that Vancouverites are questioning? Like maybe they do already question what we're drinking.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of cafes, a lot of coffee happening, and we just, I mean, it's part of the ritual of going, but are we doing better, or like maybe thinking about what we're drinking, and where like the whole system of like the farmer, where it comes from and things like that.
And I think out of like, Canada, there's only a few provinces or cities for that matter really pushing the game, right? But it's interesting because even like trying to do the AirPress Championship last year, like trying to organize that, and at the same time like Phil and Sebastian did it, and like there's this miscommunication, and it's just because like our country is so vast that it's hard to come together as a country. So then you have cities individually going about it as an international front, and it's like even Victoria, that's not far away from Vancouver itself, I feel like has its own game, right? Like it stands alone in the coffee community, separate from Vancouver, I feel like, You have roasters like Bows and Arrows that have created their own like road within the coffee community that I think like Bows and Arrows in Victoria is kind of separate from Vancouver, even though Vancouver supplies a lot or like carries a lot of its product. But within the international standards, it's seen as separate identities, so it's like,
so it's hard to have, what I'm hearing is kind of like, because we're so far apart, it's hard to
awesome other cities too, but I do think like Vancouver is a pretty sweet city in the fact that like if you have the gumption and like the passion to drive yourself towards something and like really carve out a space for yourself, you can do it in the city because for some reason, like, the community is like thirsty for people like that, and they want to support people like that.
Right.
But you really have to be able to be the type of person to carry it out because there's no one there holding your hand or who's done it really before you, right? It's like,
I feel like you kind of stand for that as well, because like a lot of what you're doing, food and tying together coffee and your experience internationally, like that's really cool, and like that's bringing a new perspective.
Yeah, and I also think I'm not the only one, right? It's like, I think it's like, especially in a city like Vancouver where you feel like you kind of are in a very small community, you think that you are the only one who has these thoughts, but it's not true. It's like, I feel like everyone else has, on some spectrum, has considered it, but maybe there isn't enough dialogue between people to really foster those ideologies. So I think what you're doing, Vanier, like where you're creating connections, is the key to really perpetuating the dialogue, right? I think we were talking about it before, where like, it's like, how come there isn't this community of people asking these questions of how to like create food as a sensory object or material? And it's like, no, I think like a lot of people consider it on a daily level, if not like in their professions, but whether or not there hasn't been this interest or this openness to create the dialogue between people, for some reason, like, Vancouver is considered a clique city, and it's like, you're really developed with the people who you surround yourself with, and unless you have that dialogue going within your circle, it really doesn't get developed.
I'm still finding that.
Yeah, and it's like, it took me like 10 years to find that.
So like encouraging to even hear that viewpoint, because I think a lot of people are like aware of that in Vancouver, and they're like, oh yeah, well, that's just the way it is, and we're not like that, or it's what you make of it. But like, I mean, the way that you put it, every time I talk to you, it's very refreshing. It's like super encouraging.
I'm an internal optimist, and also like, traveling, it's like you realize that like people don't know what you're about unless you ask them what they're about. Like, it's like you have your own story, you know what you're about, but I think there's so much opportunity in hearing someone else's story, and then how you can create that dialogue with them rather than just spouting out your story, right? Because it's like,
they don't really care about what you're about until they know that you are
interested in them, right? It's like the sincerity, and like, I think the coffee community here is great for that, because it's, when you're working in the cafe, you're meeting very different people on a daily level, and I know all baristas go through this, but I think in a transient city like Vancouver as well, where you're hitting so many different demographics on a daily level, you really do have the opportunity to connect to very different people.
That's what I miss in coffee.
Yeah, right? And that's
sure.
what I miss too, working at a cafe. Like, as a caterer and as a self-entrepreneur now, it's like the only times I interact with a public is when it's
People
within...
get in touch with you.
Yeah, it's when people get in touch with me, or it's like within a certain demographic, right? And doing this thing in Burnaby opened me up to a very different demographic that I wouldn't have reached out to naturally, right? And I think that's what I miss within coffee. And I think it's a lot of times what people forget working in coffee, they think that when they're in coffee, they're working on the espresso machine. And this is kind of like how I view London as well, is that like, in London, I feel like it's a very competitive coffee industry where you're in coffee to compete, and if you're not competing, why are you in it? You're not there to necessarily work on your customer service. Whereas in Vancouver, sometimes that's the only reason why you are in the coffee industry, is that you're not in the coffee industry to compete.
It's all or nothing, really.
Yeah, and it's like, I think that's a lot of the things that people forget. Is like we in the coffee industry, it started off being about customers.
That's really cool because I think that gives the power back to the baristas in engaging.
Yeah.
And you know, they have the interface to
Yeah, they have
really
the power to
represent,
create.
Yeah,
the interest, right? It's like if you really celebrate the industry that you're in, whether it's on the level of, you know, the story of the farmer or the roaster, or you as the barista like dialing and then serving it, you know, all those different levels, it's like you're a single identity that can then translate that to someone who has no idea, or who has some sort of level or potential interest in that industry, right? It's like there's an opportunity there that I don't think we all celebrate where we could be, you know, and that's the story that I'm always trying to push for within the industry. And I think we can get caught up with competitions and stuff like that, but in competitions I think are great because it really dials in your love of an industry and it really connects you on an international level. Yeah, but then if you don't connect it back to the reason as to why this industry started, there's a loss of translation, a loss of opportunity, I think, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have a lot more questions, so maybe part of that will be on the website if you guys go there and check it out. Last question is, who's your nomination for the next Coffee Friend?
It'd be Joey Vitos, who works at Alicia Coffee. And honestly, it's because I think he's a geek when it comes to many things, and anything he touches, he really wants to invest in on an intellectual level as well as on a personal level, on like a human level, and I think he would have a lot to say. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for tuning in. We are gonna edit this up and put it on the website. So that's Coffee Friends 12. See you later.